From Crosby Village
to your radio.
Bliss Radio.
Joined in the studio by Dean Sullivan and Kevin McMahon. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming.
Good morning, Roy. How are you?
I'm very, very good. And
I think I'm a day out of sync. I thought it was the 13th today. It's not, is it?
no, it's the 12th. You're definitely out of sync, Dean.
The week is running away with me, yes.
Oh, okay, you know what day it is, don't you, Kevin?
I do know what day it is.
Oh, well,
yes,
good.
it's a Wednesday. I'm glad to be back.
Well, first of all, we are broadcasting from Crosby here, and a little bit of nostalgia hits you, as it turns out, when you arrive in Crosby today, does it not?
Well,
Dean?
yeah. I was just talking to your friend just in reception there. I know Crosby very, very well because when I was a full-time teacher before I became a professional actor, the last school I taught at full-time was St Luke's Household, which is just across the road from here. So,
right.
yeah, it's a long time since I've been back.
What was your teacher? What
I used to teach
well,
it was a primary school. Now I taught everything.
Oh, right, okay.
School. So, yeah, maths, English, PE, drama, yeah.
So what period of time, without wishing to age you here, Dean, what period of time, what time are we talking?
It's a long, long time ago. I was just talking to your receptionist.
And Kez has just come out there.
She said, oh, yeah, I know St Luke's. I think she said she used to work there. I said, well, when I worked there, I think it was probably before you were born. Because I gave up teaching in 1984. And I remember that because it was George Orwell, the famous novel, 1984. And, I'd gone for an audition to somebody who'd seen me in an amateur play. And she was running at the time the Chester Gateway Theatre. And she'd got a job up at Pitlochry Festival Theatre and was auditioning actors for that, and she had 2 equity cards to give away. And in those days, you had to have an equity card.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, you could not
Holy
work
Grail,
professionally. It's not like it is today. So, and they were like gold dust because you couldn't get an equity card unless you had professional work. So
you couldn't get a professional work unless you had an equity card.
Right,
it was a chicken and egg thing,
exactly. So anyway, I ended up auditioning for her, and I said, because I was teaching full time and the season was to start in April, and I auditioned for her in the January. I said, look, if I happen to be lucky enough to be offered an equity card by you will have to let me know by the end of January, because that was the last day I could hand in my resignation if I wanted to leave in that spring term. Yeah. Just the way it worked out under terms and conditions, the way you work. And so she said, oh, yes, I'll let you know. And she didn't let me know until the very, very last day of January. She rang me up at the school. Right. It was lunchtime and she rang. Someone came and said, oh, Mr. Sullivan, there's a telephone call for you. And so she offered me the job, and I went, yeah, delighted, thank you very much. And I don't know why, but I just happened to have my letter of resignation typed in my school bag. And I went into the headmistress, June Bernard, who's from Crosby. I think she's still alive, actually. And she lives in Manor Road, just up the road from here. And I said, I'd just like you to have this letter, and I gave it to her, and she read it. She nearly fell off her chair.
All right.
So, yeah. But fond memories. I love Crosby, and I love teaching in that school. It's a beautiful school. Church of England school is nice.
Was there an element of when you submitted your resignation, did your colleagues think, come on, Dean, what are you playing at?
Well, they did,
this is a pipe dream. They
did, and without blowing my own trumpet, I was being groomed by Sefton authorities, Sefton education authorities. It's all changed now. It's all very different. You don't have education authorities anymore. It's all outsourced, as it were. And I was being groomed to be the youngest head teacher in Sefton Authority.
Right, okay.
So, and I loved teaching. It was something that I'd always wanted to do from when I was a child. I had no ambition to be an actor whatsoever. I used to go for elocution lessons to a wonderful lady in Liverpool called May Bradbury, who was actually the aunt of Kim Cattrall.
Oh, yeah.
Of Sex and the City fame. And she used to stay with Mrs. Bradbury, and we used to have drama lessons together on a Saturday mornings. That's my claim to fame with Sex and the City. Anyway,
that's okay.
So, so I used to go for elocution lessons with her, and I used to be involved in amateur dramatics. She had a youth theatre group called Merseyside Youth Drama, and I was in that. And it was just an interest I had. And when I went to university and then teacher training, I used to be part of the amateur groups, and then I was part of the Neptune Theatre group in Liverpool. It's not there anymore, but that was considered to be the best amateur group in Liverpool on Merseyside, and I was a member of that. And to cut a long story short, this professional director saw me in an amateur show and ended up offering me an equity card. But a teacher was what I always wanted to be, and I loved it. I really loved it. But it was one of those things
it's a
where
very different landscape now, though. They are
totally.
Game, isn't it?
But then in those days, that opportunity was never going to come again down my road. So you either took it or you'd lose it. But my life would have been very, very different if I'd have stayed in teaching. I would probably be. I would have taken early retirement. I would have been a head teacher, or I might have been an inspector of schools, or whatever. If I'd moved in that direction. So my life would have been very, very different to the way it turned out. So you never know what's around the next corner.
No, you don't. Well, Kevin's in, and you work on various things together. Now, do you have a Crosby connection, by the way, Kevin?
I don't have a Crosby connection that I can think of. No, but just listening to what Dean said there about getting an equity card.
Yeah.
And as he quite rightly pointed out, it was that, as you said, the chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the card, I got mine as a stage manager for Manchester Royal Exchange.
All right.
So that's a one way in that you could get it that way.
It's become. My equity card. It was Dean and I used to work at another radio station, and I think it was Jamie Breers.
I know Jamie, yes.
From Equity, and I'd interviewed him one day, and he said, "Oh, by the way, have you ever thought about joining Equity?" And I said, "Yeah, it's not that easy to get." And he went, "Yeah, no, I'll just fill this form in." It still has a bit of. I think it still has a bit of gravitas about it, but certainly not at the period of time when you're talking about, Dean.
Well, you couldn't get in. You couldn't do a professional job. And even when you did get an equity card, it used to be initially it was a provisional card.
That's right.
And I think a full card, you had to have 36. Am I right? 36 weeks work in a year.
I think so.
Only 1 year.
And the provisional card didn't allow you to work in the West End at all.
Or TV or film.
TV, things like that.
Yeah, it was on stage. Yeah, it was all very, very strict rules in those days.
And in order to get your provisional card, you had to show future engagements.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And someone would come out and see that that was correct, and they'd watch your performance, and then it would go back to the branch, and they would vote on you. And if the vote went against you, you didn't get it anyway.
Yeah.
Even if you did qualify by your performance and by.
Well, of course, nowadays you can just turn up at an audition and get the job.
Doesn't matter
if they think you're right for it.
I think Margaret Thatcher, because obviously Margaret Thatcher would have viewed Equity with disdain because it represented the old union closed shop, really. Didn't
That's
it?
right.
So you resign. You go down to the Chester Gateway. What happened after that?
Well, it wasn't the Chester Gateway. That's where she worked, and then she got a job at Pitlochry Festival Theatre. So I went there. It was a 6-month contract. And I don't know if you know that part of Scotland. It's up in the Highlands. It's quite remote, really, but it's quite a famous theatre on the banks of the river. Is it the River Tay? I think it's the River Tay, where the salmon go leaping up the river.
Yeah, okay.
Very picturesque. It was like being on holiday for 6 months. It was, and the funny thing was that when I first arrived there, I didn't know it was the first time I'd been to Scotland. Scotland is the most beautiful country with beautiful dramatic scenery. It's fantastic.
I've been to Glasgow.
Have you? So have I, but this was the countryside. But the funny thing was, when I arrived there, I slept I just slept all the time because the air is so pure up there, or it was then in those days, that, coming from a conurbation like Liverpool, you're not used to clean, fresh air. So I slept a lot. But it was a wonderful job and a great learning curve, and you sometimes hear this story, and it was absolutely true in my case, that the first day I arrived a couple of weeks after the main company had started work, just because of the way the term had finished here at St Luke's, where I was teaching in Crosby. And so the company they were already there and in situ, and I arrived 2 weeks later, and I arrived at the theatre the first morning, 10 o'clock for a read-through and rehearsals to start. And my contract said play as cast. So they were doing 6 plays back to back. So I didn't know what I was going to play. They just said you'd play as cast, which was the director would say, well, you're going to play this, you're going to play that. Only small parts, obviously, because that was my first professional job. And they said, you've got to do some stage management as well. So you'll be making some props and doing stage management where moving scenery. And I said, yeah, that's fine. Okay. And I went from earning a fantastic salary as being an acting deputy head teacher of a primary school here in Sefton to earning £90 a week. And the first day I arrived, the company stage manager said, oh, welcome, Dean. He said, see that brush there? I said, yes. He said, take that brush and sweep the stage. Literally, that was the first job I did, was sweep the stage. Yeah. And I remember sweeping the stage thinking, 2 weeks ago, I was in charge when the headmistress had gone to a course, and I was in charge of that school with, 350 pupils and in charge of all the staff and, huge responsibility. And now I've come down to this, sweeping the stage. I thought, have you made the right decision, Dean? And I said, yes, you have. So, I never regretted it.
How old have you been at the time?
Oh, then I must have been about maybe 28, I think.
Yeah.
So 28. Yeah, and I say to young people say to me, "Oh, how old were you when you first went on TV?" And I said, "Well, much older than you are now." So, and I can remember working, because you don't know what's around any corner. You don't know what opportunities will come along. I worked with a lovely chap who played Bing Crosby on Brookside many years ago. John Crosby, a lovely gentleman he was. And he'd been a jobbing actor all of his life, working for next to nothing, doing repertory theatres up and down the country, living out of a suitcase in theatrical digs, had all the wonderful stories. And then his life changed overnight because he got this part on a major television programme, which was Brookside, and suddenly earning a lot of money. And, 6 months or 12 months down the line, there we all were going to his wedding that was featured on the front page of OK Magazine.
Wow.
So, your life can turn on a sixpence. My lovely friend, dear friend of mine, Sue Johnson, always says this. Your life can turn on a sixpence.
On a sixpence. Well, we'll come back because obviously we want to talk about that particular aspect. I'm joined in the studio by my guests today, which is Dean Sullivan and Kevin McMahon. So, my guests in the studio today, Kevin McMahon and Dean Sullivan. Now then, Dean, just before we took the break there, we started to touch on the subject of the soap opera that you were involved in.
What was that called?
Was it Albion Market? No, it was
Albion Market. I remember Albion Market. That was a shame that came off. That was a good soap. Yeah. That's made by Granada. And my old friends were in that.
There was a period there, wasn't there? Because obviously there was a soap crazy period because you had Albion and the ill-fated El Dorado as well.
Well, there's talk of them bringing that back.
Yeah,
apparently the set still exists.
I've been to it.
Out in Spain,
I've been to the place.
Well, it's still there, but the only thing about it is, unlike Brookside set where everything worked, so you could turn on the tap and the water would come out. And, if you were loading up the washing machine, you could switch it on, the fridge would work. Yeah. But in El Dorado, apparently, there's no running water whatsoever on their sets.
But, well, let's go back to that. Yeah. Phil Redmond puts together Brookside. Now, were you there you weren't there at the initial?
No, everybody thinks I was there from the episode 1, but I wasn't. I joined about 2 years in, just about nearly 2 years in 1985 I joined, and ended up being there for 18 years. So it was.
How did that come about? Was it a phone call out of the blue, or
what it was going back to what I mentioned before about doing that first job at Pitlochry Festival Theatre, and one of the shows I was in was a show called Wild Oats by John O'Keefe, a restoration comedy, and playing the lead in that was the guy who played Roger Havisham in Brookside, one of the first families, Heather Havisham's husband, Mandy Burton, and he played it. What was his real name now? It'll come to me. Anyway, he was playing the lead part, and we made friends. I was playing a couple of other parts in the play in Wild Oats, and he said to me, "Oh, Dean, you're from Liverpool. You should write to them at Brookside, because in those days, if you were genuine Liverpudlian and you had an equity card, they would see you. They would give you an open audition. That's just the way it was when it first started out." So I said, "Yes, okay, well, I'll do that." Anyway, I didn't get round to doing it because when that job finished, I then went to Theatre Clwyd, to the pantomime there, did that job, and then after that I went to Chester Gateway and did Steaming, which is, don't even know that place, Steaming. It's all women set in a steam bath, all women. And I was the only man in it, the caretaker, who was you'd see him at the glass knocking on the door. Anyway, so I didn't really, work was just sort of doing one job after another. And then I bumped into Rob, his name was, Rob Spenlove, his name was, and the name would come to me. And I literally bumped into him in London, and he said, "Did you ever write to get in touch with Brookside?" I went, "No, I've just been a little bit busy." He said, "You should, you really, really should." So I said, "Okay." Anyway, I did. I dropped them a line. Didn't have an agent at the time, and I dropped them a line, and they got in touch with me almost straight away, really, and said, "Yeah, come in and read for this part." So I went, and I was very, very nervous. It was my first, foray into television. And I went and I read this part, and the part was to play the brother of a character called Terry Sullivan, who was played by Brian Regan. Brian played that. Terry Sullivan. It was to play his girlfriend, Cheryl Lee was the name of the actress. It was to play his girlfriend's brother, and it was 2 episodes. And I went and I read for this part, and I thought I'd done quite well, despite the nerves. And anyway, I came away, and I said, "Well, when will I find out?" They said, "Oh, we'll let you know typical. That's the
Very
thing they always say. We'll let you know,
yeah.
and of course they never let you know. You know, so the phone didn't ring and all of this, and I got quite down about this. I thought, oh my gosh, well, I can do a Liverpool accent because I'm from Liverpool, and you know, I've got a full equity card now because of the number of weeks I'd sort of clocked up on the card. I thought, well, then maybe I should go back to teaching, really, if I can't get a part in a Liverpool soap as a genuine Liverpool person. And I didn't think I was that bad an actor. I thought maybe I'm in the wrong profession. I should go back to teaching. Anyway, because a long story short, a few weeks later, they rang me up again, the casting director, and said, we want you to come in and read for this part. So anyway, it was very different going on the second occasion, because I wasn't nervous this time around, because I'd already gone through that, and I thought I'd worked myself up into such a state. I thought, I'm not going to do this, because why get yourself so agitated and then you don't get the job? What's the point of going through all that stress? So I was quite blasé about it, really. And when I arrived at the studios out in West Derby, which was actually, for those listeners who don't know, it was a real houses. The Phil Redmond had bought up a whole close on this housing estate, and they were real, and as I mentioned before, everything worked in the houses. And I turned up at the security barrier, and there was John McArdle, who played Billy Corkhill. Yeah, and he was at the barrier, and I knew John because he used to work. You know, small world, show business is a small world. He used to live at used to work at Chester Gateway, and I knew him socially. And he said, "Oh, Dean, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm reading for the part." And he said, "Oh, that's my brother." I said, "That's the part of my brother they're auditioning today." He said, "You'll get that part." I went, "Well, if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't." He said, "You'll get that." Anyway, I went into the reading, read it to the best of my ability. Fine, no nerves. I said, "Do you want me to read it any other way?" They went, "No, that's fine." And off I went. I said, "Thanks." Didn't even say, "When will you let me know?" Just went. And in those days, there were no mobile phones or anything like that. So we're talking about 1985. And I came on, I went straight to London. I was going to see some friends in London, going to see shows down there, and I was staying down in London. And at the time I was living in Chester, so I stayed down there for about a week. And when I came back, I went to my house where I was living in Chester, and the little red light was beeping away on the answer machine. The answer phone. Beep, 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 little red light. Do. So I pressed the button. "Hello, Dean. Casting department here at Brookside. Could you call us back? Thank you." Beep. "Hi, Dean. Don't know whether you got the last message. Right. It's the casting department here at Brookside. Call us back at your earliest convenience." Beep. "Dean, I don't know whether you're getting these messages. We really would like to speak to you about the time that you came into..." Anyway, it was about 6 messages. So anyway, I eventually rang them back. And cut a long story short, they offered me the part of Jimmy Corkhill. And in those days, it was what they called an regular character. So I'd just come for a few episodes, and then he'd disappear, and you wouldn't see him for a couple of months, and then he'd come back, and that's the way it went on for a few years. And then they eventually made the character into a full-time character. So it was just a regular job then. And it was many years later, and we were at the BAFTA Awards in London at the Grosvenor Hotel, big posh affair there. The BAFTAs in those days, when they used to do the film awards and the television awards. So it was a big, massive. There's still a big, massive occasion even today, the BAFTAs. And Phil had a couple of tables, and there were a few of us there, and because Phil was very sort of magnanimous. It wouldn't just be the faces, it wouldn't just be the stars who were there, people from backstage,
everybody,
the officers, there would be a mixture of people, because everybody worked on the programme, obviously. And Vicky Tomlinson was on the table that I was sat on. He was roaring with laughter, and he nudged the casting director, a lady called Dorothy Andrew, and he said to her, "Tell Dean what you've just told me." Then he was laughing away. I said, what's this? And she said, "Oh, well, you know this anyway, don't you, Dean?" I said, "Well, no, what?" She said, "Well, that first time when you came in for that first part that you read for." So I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, there was no way you were going to get that part anyway, because we knew Jimmy Corkhill was coming up. And we said, well, we can't give him that part. We'll save him. He's too good for that part. We'll save him to play Jimmy." Yeah. So I went, "Pardon?" She went, "Yeah, you knew that, didn't you?" I said, "No, I didn't." I said, "I nearly gave up acting after that first audition." I said, "I can't believe that all these years later, and you tell me that you had me in mind to come into the programme anyway." So you never know what people are thinking, do you?
Do you know, the thing is, though, I've always wanted to ask you this, actually, Dean, because now I was a big fan of Brookside. I felt it was a soap that brought something a little bit different than the other ones that were around. when the character of Jimmy Corkhill first came into it, was this almost a lovable rogue, I suppose would be a good term to use, a Del Boy-esque character. Yeah. And then this dark side of Jimmy Corkhill came into it, didn't he? And was that a decision of yours to take the character in a different direction, or was it, did the writing crew, did Phil Redmond say, no, I feel as though we need to twist the character a little?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, over the years people have said to me, did you have any influence on storylines? And a lot of people used to say as well, and do you make those lines up when when you're on? I said, no, don't make them up. But I serve the writer. I'm an actor. I'm there to serve the writer. And I used to be quite fiercely proud of the fact that whatever was in that script, that's what I would deliver. Dead letter perfect. I used to have a bit of a reputation at Brookside where they used to say, "Oh, Dino, whatever's on that script, that's what he delivers. Word perfect." Because that's what I felt I had to do as an actor. That was what I was being professional about in my work. And so, as far as the storylines were concerned, no, because I wasn't paid to come up with ideas for storylines. That's what the writers were there to do. That's what Phil Redmond was there to do. But it was interesting because the drug storyline that went on for many, many years. I remember Mal Young, who was he's now out in LA producing The Young and the Restless, which is a very, very famous American soap. Yeah, it's been going for years and years. So Mal's in charge of that now. But when he was producing Brookside, he called me into the office and said, with Phil as well, and said, we're going to take Jimmy down a different road here. We want to involve him in a drugs storyline. So I went, oh, that's great. That's interesting. It was really good news for me as an actor because I had no experience of that at all. I had to do some research and look into it carefully because we prided ourselves, Brookside prided themselves on, getting things accurate and playing things for real. We didn't want to patronise anybody. So there was a lot of research that went on. And it was very interesting because the intention was always for it to be a storyline that would run for a few years. Would not just be over and done with in a few weeks, because they wanted to reflect what went on in the real world, and they wanted to actually show a character like Jimmy who was generally on the wrong side of the law, but he wouldn't do anybody any harm, in those early days when we first saw him. He'd maybe get a bit of knockoff or, and that would be about as far as it would go. But the drug storyline was going to see him go into some really, really dark places. So it was really interesting for me as an actor to explore those sort of avenues. And it was also interesting from the programme's point of view because what Phil wanted to do, really, there was talk that they might kill Jimmy off because at one time it was quite a powerful storyline where he was injecting himself with dirty needles. And in those days, there was the chance that you could catch AIDS through sharing needles, addicts sharing needles between each other, between themselves. And that was a suggestion that was made that maybe Jimmy might have contracted AIDS. So that was a very big dramatic storyline. And there was talk that they were going to kill him off to maybe, demonstrate this. Don't go down the road of drug abuse because look what can happen. Anybody can get pulled into it. And, you might end up losing your life. But what Phil decided to do, and I remember him calling me into the office and discussing this with me, he said, we're not going to kill Jimmy off. We actually want to show that there can be light at the end of the tunnel. That people, just because they are on drugs or they're abusing drugs, it doesn't mean it's the end of the line necessarily. People can turn their lives around and make something of themselves and become clean. And that's what they did in the end with Jimmy, which was great. And then, of course, they took him down the line of, because Jimmy said, I want to be a teacher. I can relate to these people, these drug addicts, and I can be a teacher. So, of course, Jimmy ended up being a teacher. But, of course, the only way he could become a teacher was by forging his teaching certificates. So, the old Jimmy came back into it there.
See, that's the thing, though, because obviously there's a bit of relevance to the teaching. There's a bit of relevance to your real-life character because Dean Sullivan and Jimmy Corkhill are poles apart, aren't they? I mean, so you would have had to have worked a little bit on that character because, you wouldn't...
Well, journalists used to say...
I'm sure Dean Sullivan wouldn't be flogging... dodgy televisions.
Well, I can remember journalists saying to me when I was doing the drug story, and I went, well, have you ever taken drugs? I said, you can. I said, even if I had, I'm not saying that I had. I said, even if I had, I said, do you think I'd tell a journalist? Something like that. They said, and are you anything like Jimmy? I said, well, I look like him. obviously, and I can sound like him. I said, but I am nothing like him whatsoever. But, you know, that's the skill of an actor, to create the character, to lift the character off the page. And Kevin will know about this, because I've worked with Kevin as a director, and Kevin's acted in plays that I've directed. And he knows, you know, you've got your script, and your skill as an actor, first and foremost, you learn those words. It's the first thing you have to do. Get those words under your belt and know them inside out, and know the parts inside out, and then develop the character and get the character. What we say, or how we say it, is get it off the page, make it come to life, and that's your skill as an actor.
Yeah.
That's the contribution you make. You know, you can have the best script in the world, and usually the best dramas start with the best scripts. But if you haven't got the best actors doing it, you're flogging a dead horse.
Yeah.
So, to go back to the question that you asked about, did I have an input into the way the character developed or the storylines? No, because that wasn't my job.
Yeah.
My job was to make it believable once it was presented to me.
Right. Well, we're going to talk about jobs that potentially might exist for you guys in the future, because I know, Kevin, you've got a musical that's in development at the moment, so we shall talk about that next. We'll take a little break, and that's where we shall be at next. It's Bliss Radio for a Wednesday morning.
Bliss Radio.
Fighting back against dull network radio. Bliss Radio.
Bliss Radio.
Yeah,
Local
welcome.
and proud.
I should get used to that jingle, shouldn't I? Thank you very much. Anyway, welcome back. It is Bliss Radio for a Wednesday morning. My guests in the studio are people well respected, certainly by me, within the acting community, the production of plays, all that kind of stuff. It is Dean Sullivan and Kevin McMahon. Just before we move on to what you're doing at the moment, before the break, though, we were talking about the demise of Jimmy Corkhill as he went down this drug route. Kevin, who's here, contributed to that as well, didn't you?
Fictionally, yes.
Fictionally.
I was played a small part in the demise of the Jimmy Sullivan character, because
Jimmy Sullivan.
I
thought he said Jimmy Somerville. Someone else.
The Jimmy Corkhill character, because I was his drug dealer at one time.
Right, yeah.
But a drug dealer, I was a doctor. And again, that was Phil Redmond's idea. He was trying to say, and quite rightly so, that drug dealers, drug takers come from all walks of life.
Yeah, so why not come
and so it didn't make it like some sort of a drug dealing street scally. He decided he needed a character who was a professional person.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that's how that came about.
Dean was saying, that you've directed, and you've both directed each other in productions and what have you. How did you two first meet?
Well, I'm thinking, and Dean will correct me, was the first play Blue Remembered Hills, Dean?
Was that the first one you did for me?
I'm thinking it was, yeah.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, probably was, yeah. Out at the old garden festival site at the amphitheatre there.
Right,
yeah. We did it there, didn't we?
Yeah.
Was that the first one you did?
I think it was, yeah. Well, the garden festival site, as you know, they've
they had a beautiful
plans.
Amphitheatre there. Purpose-built theatre. It's all gone now.
They've got plans to, of course, redevelop the site. Let's hope they bring back some more performance spaces. They had more than one, but this particular performance space that we used was the amphitheatre. I don't know if you remember that, Roy.
I actually never went to the festival. I've been to the site, and it's something quite eerie about seeing it, because it was such a failed project, and it was very symbolic of Liverpool's status at the time that it failed, and it's only now, when you see Liverpool and where it is, and the kind of leading beacon that it is, that obviously you forget about those things. But I never got to actually see it.
Well, we were doing a touring production. Dean was directing Dennis Potter's Blue Remembered Hills.
Yeah.
You know the play. It's a group of children who are played by adults. So imagine playing a child for the entirety of that performance. Children never stop moving, so it's actually extremely physical, isn't it?
Yeah.
But one of the venues was the amphitheatre at the Festival Garden site. So I'm thinking that was the first one you directed.
And how long ago? That's a long time ago.
Yes, it is.
30 years ago?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
So collaboration-wise, now I know that we never got to speak about it last time you were here, Kevin, but yeah, you're working on a musical.
I'm working on a musical.
It's a very taxing thing to do that.
It is indeed. It's called Windmill Hill, and it's about a Liverpool community, the characters that inhabit that community. There is
actually a Windmill Hill in Runcorn that's inhabited by Scousers, by the way, as well.
Funny you should say that, Roy, because only recently I learned that because I was just Googling something. I thought, there is a real place called Windmill Hill, a real estate, isn't it? But I had no knowledge of that before.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, it's about this estate and the characters that inhabit it. It's quite out there, quite a bizarre piece of work. But I'm collaborating with a guy called Chris O'Neill, the musician. You may know Chris. You may know him from the film Backbeat, in which he played Paul McCartney.
Oh, right, yeah.
He's a very talented musician. He's got several different bands. He's touring continually. And I'm collaborating him. He writes all of the music, and I've written the book, the script, and the lyrics to the song.
Right.
He's something of a genius because he's always touring. We communicate by email, and I will send him some of my lyrics, which are, I could say, quite bizarre at times. And within a day or two, he has transformed.
He's managed to do something with it.
And I'm thinking at the time, which frees me up greatly, because I know that I can just let my imagination go. I don't have to think about how is Chris going to turn this into a song.
You just know he can do it.
I just know he can do it.
Yeah.
So that's a great freedom.
What time scale are we looking at before we could potentially see
it's
this?
what we call in development.
Yeah. Okay.
A good phrase, hasn't it, Roy? But it's actually with Colin McEwen, of LA Productions at the moment. And Colin is working with me.
Can I ask, is there a part in it for me?
Well, it's between...
Well, you are such an opportunist.
Well, you could have asked.
Yeah. Well,
I have already.
It is a Liverpool-based...
Yeah. Well, this does actually bring me back to the point. It's a little kind of like conclusion to what we were talking about before. Obviously, Brookside was terminated. If you could explain that, why that was, I'd be interested. But surely I would have thought, I know yours is a musical there, but if ever there was a place that you should be able to successfully make a soap opera, surely it's this part of the world.
Well, we were talking in the car, weren't we?
We were, yes.
Kevin, about it. I'm working on something as well at the moment, because I go all over the country. Everywhere I go, if I go out in public, right, I ever step outside my own front door. And I'm going into Liverpool today, so it'll happen today. But it's not just Liverpool; it happens in London or wherever I go in the country. If I'm visiting friends, I'm going to the theatre, whatever I may be doing, even on holiday. Every single time I go out in public, somebody asks me about Brookside. They either say, "I love Brookside. You are my favourite character. Why did they take it off? Will they bring it back?" And this programme finished in 2003. It finished on screen 15 years ago, and people are still talking about it. Not just to other friends of mine who were in the show. They get asked the same question. So there's still an appetite for the programme out there. There was a rumour that it was going to be coming back to our screens. My email and my phone and my Twitter account went berserk, with people all around the country wanted to know, was it true? We wanted to come back. So there's an appetite for it. There's an appetite for, I believe, a continuing drama, be it another soap or even, a one-off drama or a series that has a Scouse theme to it.
Yeah.
People love the Scousers wherever you go. It's just something that people are drawn to. They find the Scouse people, fascinating within their own right. So I think there's something missing on our television screens at the moment. There's an appetite for it. So, and I think Liverpool should be back on the map, back on TV, especially when you think of, the rejuvenation and the regeneration that's happened in Liverpool because in the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, if you look if you look at the way Liverpool is now, if to reflect where it is, you've got this. You've inherently got your rock of working class people from the Dockers years ago, but now you've got this incredible affluence as well. And if you see, as I say, it talks to when you go back to the unrest back in the 1980s, to go to certain parts of it now with houses that are beyond the affordability of the people who lived there.
When you look back at a program like Boys from the Black Stuff, Alan Bleasdale, which was an iconic program that's affected so many people and changed the face of British TV in many, many ways. But there's one scene I remember where the Yozza character was pushing Peter Kerrigan, who was playing the granddad, in a wheelchair, and they filmed it in front of the Albert Dock. Now, if you look at that, you can buy it on DVD, Boys from the Black Stuff, and I think it was repeated not that long ago on one of the TV channels. But there's this scene, and there's Yozza, gives a job, pushing Peter Kerrigan's character in a wheelchair in front of the Albert Dock, and the Albert Dock was derelict.
Wow.
It was about to be demolished. It was, all the windows were put in. It was like the hoardings were up. You were not allowed to go there. All the docks were full of all sorts of sludge and all the rest of it. It was just an absolute eyesore, and it was about to be demolished. Yeah. And it was, you mentioned Thatcher before, and Michael Heseltine was given the job of Minister for Liverpool and whatever, and he turned the fortunes of Liverpool around in many, many ways. And the Albert Dock was saved. And you look at the Albert Dock now, it's one of the biggest tourist attractions, not in this country, but in Europe. Yeah. And you think this is amazing.
It's phenomenal, as I say, and it's
and
not
everywhere
just
you go. We were just in the car travelling in today to see you, Roy, and I said to Kevin, I remember working up here when I was teaching up here. I said, that building there was offices. It might have been the education offices. It's now being turned into luxury apartments. Everywhere you go is luxury apartments.
Well, this is
There's
it.
places on the Strand now. It used to be offices, and they're now luxury apartments.
I've often said this because the conditions that the dockers worked in were notorious. You know what I mean? The health and safety, but there wasn't anything as such. And when you consider that what those buildings were used for, the hardship that would have been happening in there, and now these palatial apartments and that, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Everything has changed, and there's a need somewhere along the line for that to be reflected on screen.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a whole new world out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would make for something good. What about yourselves? I mean, have you ever put something together between the pair of you to come up with something?
Well, we famously put together. It never came off, and I can never understand why. Because every time I used to tell people about this idea that we had, well, it wasn't just an idea. We actually made. It was more than a trailer, really. It was a taste of what this series was going to be. And I used to tell people, about it, taxi drivers, what are you working on, Dean? I say, well, I'm making on this new project. It's about this guy, and he's got two wives. And one lives on one side of the River Mersey, and the other one lives on the other side of the River Mersey.
But
they never ever meet.
For your wife?
Yeah, they never ever meet, and he's always ducking and diving because he's terrified that, these two families, he's got one family on one side of the river and another family on the other side of the river, that they're going to come together, and he's got a son on one side of the river and a daughter to the other family on the other side. So it was a great idea, and people would say, God, that sounds fantastic. Oh, it's absolutely marvellous. Has it got a title? What's it called? And I said, yeah, it has got a title. It's called, because the main character that I was going to play was called Terry Valentine. Like Valentine, the love thing, one wife on one side and another wife on the other. Terry Valentine. I said, yeah, it's got a title. It's called Terry Cross the Mersey. People used to say, what a fantastic. And even an old mate of mine, Jerry, from Jerry and the Pacemakers, Jerry Martin, I mentioned it to him one time. I said, hey, Jerry, can we use your, ferry cross the Mersey? He said, you can have it. Yeah, of course you can have it for that. You can have it, use that. That's no problem. It's also, and everybody thought it was a fantastic idea. But for some reason, I don't know whether it was because of the time, with the way the money situation was in those days, because we're talking about a while ago, aren't we? We're talking about over 10 years ago now, aren't we? When we had that idea, Kevin.
2006 or 7.
Yeah, but it was a great idea, but it just didn't, maybe the time wasn't right for it. Maybe we should revive that idea. But yeah, we're working on.
It was ahead of its time.
It was,
I think,
maybe,
because we were showing, because part of it was, we were showing that redevelopment of Liverpool, because Terry, the character the Dean would play, Terry Valentine, his two wives not only came from different sides of the river, but from different social backgrounds.
Right, yeah.
And one of them lived in a luxury apartment, and of course, Dean played the part of Terry to reflect that. So he's playing two entirely different lifestyles, and of course, in that lifestyle, he visited all the glitz and the glamour that Liverpool has. So we were very much reflecting what was the new Liverpool. And I
think that's brilliant.
I just don't think they got it at the time, did they?
Yeah. No, as I say, that is, and I can't think of any concept. I can't think of anything. There's no precedent to that I can think of. I like.
Well, what a great title, don't you think?
Terry Cross the Mersey.
Terry Cross the Mersey. It's a great title. Yeah.
No. So anyway, we're almost at time. But tell me what do you do these days, then, Dean? How do you spend your time? What's a typical day in the life of Dean Sullivan like?
Well, I get up really early because I go to bed early as well. I like to read a lot and get up early. And these days I walk my little dog along the promenade. I've got a little miniature schnauzer called Billy, and we walk along the promenade up to New Brighton because I live on the Wirral there. And probably spend most of my time saying to my agent, "No, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to. No, it's not good enough. I've read that script. No, I don't want to do that." So I take it easy these days, which is great, but. That's not to say people say to me, "Have you retired?" I go, no actor ever retires. I'm working on a couple of things. I've got an idea for mentioned before about trying to get the Scousers back on TV. So I've got an idea that I'm working on at the moment. I'm writing myself about a Scouse family, dysfunctional, of course. Maybe a cross between. EastEnders, Brookside and Shameless, maybe, those three elements thrown into it. But yeah, there's mileage there for that. And then also as well, Kevin and I were talking about a project many years ago. I used to have a theatre company called Liverpool Theatre Company, and we used to do open air plays, picnic theatre plays at Speak Hall, where you bring your picnic in the summer months and, set up your picnic on the lawn and watch an open air production that I used to direct. And Kevin was in many of those productions. And one that I did a couple, which was sort of compilation shows. One was called A Christmas Cracker. So it was all sort of extracts to do with from novels and poems and songs, all to do with Christmas, which we presented in the Great Hall. And another show that we did at Halloween time, which was called Things That Go Bump in the Night. So that was ghost stories and ghost tales and ghost songs. And I used to put it all together and, compile all the different sources and then get a group of actors to perform it. And I came up with this idea. It's not an original idea, I'm sure I'm almost certain it's been done before, but I thought, because of the connection that Charles Dickens has with Liverpool, used to perform at St George's Hall, used to read extracts from his penny stories in the lectern in the concert room at St George's Hall. I had an idea to recreate this and maybe do a Christmas show and a Christmas compendium, and it would be Charles Dickens actually doing it. Presenting this, so different. So maybe get a couple of singers in.
That lends itself to that.
I know we're on radio, but if you could see, and I'm sure if you listeners, if you go online, it'll be posted up sooner or later. A photograph of Kevin and myself, probably here in the studio, and you see Kevin just looks like Charles Dickens. He's got the beard and and the stature and ideal. And I thought, and I said to Kevin, "Will you play Charles Dickens if I put this compendium?" He said, "Of course." But wouldn't you know, and I made inquiries to book the concert room at St George's Hall this year. We're going to do it at Christmas. But just so happens that this year everybody's doing Charles Dickens. It's Christmas carols on at the Playhouse, something's on in Southport, something's on in the Brindley. Actually, Charles Dickens' great-grandson is doing, I think is he doing a reading from Christmas Carol in the concert room at Christmas time?
Does he have the beard? Does he have the beard though?
He hasn't got a beard like Kevin's beard. My gosh, that will win prizes, that beard. We're going to take it around country shows, I think, and get a rosette put on it. So that'll probably be now for next year rather than this year. So that's something that we're working on.
It's funny, when about the soap, of course, and with Brookside, you wouldn't be able to go back to the old place because it's been sold on, those houses now, haven't they?
It has been sold on, but the interesting thing about it, I had this idea quite a few years ago, because the way the storyline worked out in Brookside was all the characters, they were all moved on, because the last storyline was this big corporation was buying up all the houses because they were going to build a massive incinerator plant on the site. So every family moved away. So if they wanted to bring Brookside back, you couldn't really go back to those houses because, as far as the storyline was concerned, they'd all gone and the houses would have been demolished. But my idea was, where are they now? Do a series, Where Are They Now? So 1 week it could be, Where's Jimmy Now?
Yeah,
and he's gone
yeah.
for a pint with Sinbad and,
Yeah.
whatever he's up to. And then the following week, Ron Dixon, what's he doing? Where's Max Farnham the next episode? So a major character from the soap, a different episode each week. And that was one idea, which is great. And then I've just heard recently, maybe I shouldn't be, a bit of an exclusive for you here, but I think Phil was thinking about doing some sort of a revival of maybe a one-off drama. And it's along the lines of Where Are They Now? But obviously, because the programme's been finished getting on for 15, well, it is 15 years ago. Where are those characters now? Well, some of them would be quite elderly, and maybe they're in an old age pensioners' home somewhere.
All right, that'll be interesting, wouldn't it?
Imagine that.
Well, unfortunately, gents, I'm afraid we're out of time, but it has been a real pleasure. I'm sure there's many aspects that we could continue to talk about this, but yeah, it's been great, and I would love to think that those ideas you've suggested came to fruition.
Well, we'll come back and let you know.
Sounds good to me.
Great. Lovely talking to you, Roy.
And you, yes.
From Crosby Village
To your radio.